workshop, which I think is very important. My presentation is about where Medemer came from. So to speak, it's about the history of Medemer, where it came from, how it came about, and what it is and what it signifies. And what this requires is having to look at how it's connected to Abiy Ahmed, the author or the creator of the term Medemer. So we need to look at how the term came from him, when he used to use it, and how he has come to utilize the concepts. And this requires having to go into the nitty-gritty business of having to go through every single speech he made, or any kind of writing he participated in. Going into this, researching this stuff would take us back to when Abiy Ahmed was still an acting director at INSA. That was when the term Medemer was first utilized. This was about a decade ago. And this use of Medemer first in INSA kind of would seem surprising or maybe even ironic, because INSA, or the Information Network Security Agency, is the intelligence agency of the government, and Medemer, as we've come to identify it as, is something much more connected with love and friendship. So the use of Medemer in such a context, in such an institution, would seem somewhat surprising, but it used to be used in a very different and actually kind of very interesting context. Medemer used to mean teamwork back in INSA. It was used for some kind of organizational tool. It was used to recognize each individual's contribution to a specific organization. And this is somewhat of an apt analogy, I think, to modern societies. According to early 20th century, late 19th century social linguists such as Emil Durkheim, they use this analogy of a modern society that works according to a division of labor. A division of labor presents as a kind of solidarity for each individual, because since each individual contributes his fair share to that society, that individual feels so solidarity within that group. They don't need to in any way specifically identify with any of the members of the society or the group, but at the same time they feel part of the group, because that group needs them, not wants them, but needs them. And this is kind of the apt analogy that could relate to Medemer back when it was being used in INSA, in the Information Network and Security Agency. It was used to show and recognize people's individual contributions to the organization. And unfortunately, this definition of Medemer has, through its political evolution, kind of, we can say, disappeared, because we don't hear Medemer defined in that way anymore after Abiy left INSA. After INSA, between INSA, when he was in INSA and before it became the deputy president of the Oromia regional state, there aren't, as far as our research is concerned, or as far as we're able to find out, there isn't a use of the word Medemer by him in any of the speeches or appearances that he ever made. The earliest use of the term in its political context that we can find is when he gave an interview on the Amhara State TV. This was in 2016. This was at the height of the anti-government protests, and he was speaking about the solidarity shown between the peoples of Amhara and Oromia regional states. And this use of the word in such a context seems convenient, but at the same time, back when he was speaking at when he was giving the interview, Medemer wasn't used, or it wasn't explained as a philosophy or as a concept. It was merely used as a philosophy or just as a synonym for unity, more or less. But it was never, he never came and said, this is my philosophy, this is my concept, and I want you to know that this is Medemer. He never said that. It was merely used as phrasing. And this is also what happens again after he becomes, at least for 2 months of his premiership. Even in his inaugural speech, where more or less was his introduction to the Ethiopian public, he never refers or uses Medemer as a philosophy. Although he mentions Medemer, again, during his swearing in his inaugural speech, he never defines it as a philosophy. He again uses it as a philosophy, as a phrasing, nothing more. The same goes for a lot of the public speeches he made, the town hall meetings he participated in, the appearances he made at Parliament. There's no instance of Abiy saying that he has a philosophy called Medemer. This only changes after a speech or after an appearance he makes at Parliament. This was about 3 or 4 months after he became Prime Minister. He was answering questions from parliamentarians at Parliament. He was defending his government's budget for the 2017-18 fiscal year. This is a significant appearance that he made at Parliament. It is memorable because it was the first time that he acknowledged that state-sanctioned torture took place, and it was after that speech, and then again after the June 23rd rally which took place at Mesquite Square, that we see a greater use of the word Medemer, not by Abiy himself, but in the public sphere. Somehow throughout his speeches, his mention of the word somehow caught on, somehow the public identified with that term, and it became ubiquitous. It was in conversations, it was in opinion pieces, it was on social media, it was even in jokes, as you can see here. So it is after Medemer became popular in the public sphere that Abiy himself started to utilize the term more and more. Analogy would be as if Donald Trump, during the 2016 presidential election, during a certain campaign rally, for some reason or another, said, "Make America great again," without using it as a slogan. But that term somehow, for some reason, goes viral, and his campaign team decides to use it as his campaign slogan. That's more or less what happened with Medemer. It was first popular in the public sphere before Abiy started to recognize it, or started to say that it was his philosophy. And a very good indication of this is a speech that he gave at Millennium Hall. This was shortly after the rapprochement between Ethiopia and Eritrea. He appeared at Millennium Hall with Isaias Afwerki, and that was the first time that said that he had a philosophy, and that philosophy is Medemer. And that was also the first time that he tried to explain what Medemer exactly is. According to his explanation back then, Medemer was more or less a combination of love and friendship and forgiveness and unity. It never, at the moment, it never got more complex, more sophisticated than that. So the tools for Medemer were love and friendship, and the purpose of Medemer was to bring about love and friendship. So the means and the end were exactly the same. This may seem, especially in retrospect, kind of naive, given the complex problems of the country. It's a very diverse nation. There are a lot of unattended historical baggage. So the answer to this cannot possibly be explained in terms such as love and friendship. however nice they may sound, it's hard to deny that they sound very simplistic and naive. But it's also very important to take into consideration the political circumstances of the time. When he was explaining Medemer, or the time in which Medemer was emerging as a philosophy, if it is a philosophy, I think we'll talk about this more later, was a time of great exuberance. Abiy was very much in his honeymoon period, had a lot of successes. The biggest of them all being the rapprochement between Ethiopia and Eritrea, which is arguably still his biggest success. So it's not that surprising that a philosophy that emerged during this time would sound easy to digest and would sound somewhat simplistic, but it was. And what actually happened was time went on, and the political circumstances began to change. Abiy's honeymoon period ended, and it was important for Medemer to become complex together with the political circumstances. And what we have is, for about a year, there isn't a new meaning added to Medemer. There isn't nothing new that came into the scene until, except, and this is a very significant exception, an interview he gave very recently. This was around New Year. This was in an interview with Mazabu, and he had, during that interview, had given some very interesting definitions of what Medemer is. According to that, the new definition that Abiy gave to Medemer, he explained it as a balance between competition and working together. And this, so how he explains it is that competition, since there's always going to be a lack of resources, there's going to be always competition, and competition leads to production, but at the same time, competition in itself is not enough. It would lead to greed. So that had to be balanced with working together. And this sounds very much like a similar definition of what social democracy is, because competition, a similar definition of what social democracy is, because competition is capitalism and working together is, you can't say that it's government intervention. So it's very much similar to social democracy, at least in its economic explanation. But he also says that it's not a worldview, but how he explains it is that it is actually much bigger than a worldview. It's very much a philosophy. He uses the example of a bee that eats nectar, that how the bee doesn't actually consciously decide to eat nectar. It's just something it does by its nature. And that's actually what he's trying to say, is that it is much more closer to a natural law. It's not something just for reaching the truth about a means to reaching the truth about the economy or some social political problem, but it is a means to finding the truth about the self, about the individual. So when the jury is out still on whether or not the Medemer is a philosophy or an ideology or even a theory, because there's a book that he promised will be coming out shortly, but as it stands and as its ambitions stands, it seems very much closer to philosophy. And I think that's why it's very important to discuss this idea, and I think that's why this such workshops are very important. That's about all I have, so thank you very much.